Hey, this is Ron Reich, and I am so excited to be talking to you today for day 3 of the Heroic Launch Workshop. I hope you're excited because today we are going to be talking about your heroic launch strategy. We started at a very big picture. We've been going down and down, and now we're going to really help the rubber hit the road and really make your launch into something concrete that is going to happen sooner than later. So that, again, this is day 3. The topic is your heroic launch strategy. And on just to catch you up a little bit, on day 1, a couple days ago, we talked about the building blocks of your 6-figure payday, where the main thing we did there is we went over the 4 main sequences that you're going to want to build into your launch: the brainwashing sequence, the pre-launch sequence, the open cart sequence, and the post-launch or the cash sequence. And then I talked about the 3, essentially the 3 types of launches. In regards to the length, we have our A launches, those are our big launches. Our B launches, those are the medium ones that are about 7 to 10 days. And then we have our C promotions or C launches, which are typically no more than 4 or 5 days. And then we had you pick a launch date. So hopefully you have a launch date planned out. Ideally, you're planning on launching at least something or doing some kind of a big promotion campaign between now and the end of the year. November and December are excellent months to sell transformation, coaching, business coaching, consulting, personal development, health, and those kinds of things. So cool. Hopefully you are on board with that. And then yesterday we talked about how to uncover your 6-figure launch idea. We talked about the importance of creating new opportunities. People like new. People think new is better. The grass is always greener. And it's better to create new opportunities than it is even to solve a problem. And then I gave you essentially my ultimate hack for coming up with a great idea for your launch, which is this idea of converging trends. What's one positive trend that's happening in the world, and what's one negative trend that's happening in the world, and how can you have your launch idea be the intersection between those 2 points? So today, we're going to get a little more granular, and we're going to really help you create a launch strategy that is very much aligned with your skills and strengths, as well as your audience and how they like to hear from you and how they like to consume content. This is very important, and I don't think anyone else is talking about this because, quite frankly, they are not on my level when it comes to launches. They just don't have the experience that I do when it comes to launches, both working with my own businesses, working behind the scenes with other people's businesses, and as well as working with clients and helping them have their own 6- and 7-figure launches, or even their first 5-figure launches, which might be something that would be of interest to you. Okay, so let's get into it. So to quickly recap, once again, when a lot of the real heavy lifting of a launch, the most kind of creative aspects of it, and again, we have our 4 sequences: brainwashing sequence, pre-launch sequence, open cart sequence, then the cash or post-cart sequence. Really, to be totally honest, the brainwashing sequence, it's a little more on the formulaic side. It takes some work to figure out what exactly you're going to be talking about, but the actual structure for that, it's pretty straightforward. The open cart sequence also has a very, very specific formula to it. It's overall pretty templated. And then when it comes to the post-launch sequence, we have a few, maybe about 4 or 5 core strategies that work really, really well after a launch to really accelerate revenue. Although, again, they're kind of like clicks on the dial, do this, do that, do this. As long as you do it and implement it, you're going to make money. The thing that requires essentially the most nuance and finesse in any kind of launch really is really the pre-launch sequence. And that's really about the content that you're going to be coming up with that's going to pre-sell people on both your mechanism as well as really on your product, your program that you're actually getting people to invest in. So I talked about this on day one. The three main parts of a pre-launch sequence are opportunity, possibility, and certainty. And the important thing, this is essentially one of the most important ideas I can bring forth to you during for if you want to have a big launch, is that it's you want to take people through these three things, and as long as you take them through these three mental mind shifts, the medium doesn't matter as much, or not that the medium doesn't matter, but you have options. For example, many people incorrectly think that the only way to do a launch is in a 3-part video series where, the famous Jeff Walker PLF style. That's one type of launch, but it's not the only type of launch. And it just so happens that structure is a really good example of what we're talking about here, with typically the first video is the opportunity, second video is possibility, and the third video is the certainty, where you're showing the complete roadmap or blueprint, for example. But that is not the only way to do it. So let me give you, let's chat about a few of the different options you have when it comes to your launch. So let me go through a few of my favorites, and then we'll apply this to your situation. So of course, again, one type is the classic PLF 3-part video series. That totally is good. It works well. It still works well even in really, really competitive markets, like in the if you're selling coaching and if you're in the online marketing space. And it totally works well if you are not in that space. If you're in any market that's not used to seeing 3-part video series, which is most markets other than essentially making money online and building an online business, if you're in any of those markets, you'll be in quite good shape. That's one of them. We also have the webinar launch. Webinar launches are really great. There's different ways you can do this. So remember, we talked about our big A launches as well as our B and C launches. Any of these could be done in the context of a webinar launch. So for example, there are people who've done really, really big, let's call them A launches, which are just based on doing a series of webinars. Like they might do, I've had clients that they'll do a webinar a week for 6 weeks, and that's their launch. Or some people might, in a 2-week period, do 3 to 4 different webinars, for example. Does that make sense? One other interesting thing along these lines is that some people have started to, instead of doing a recorded 3-part video series, essentially they'll do a webinar series that is 3 webinars that lines up with those 3, essentially the same similar content that would be in the videos is taught live in a series of webinars. You might have seen some people doing that recently. Then we have the typical kind of 1-week webinar type promotion that might be, start promoting it on Monday, the webinar's on Wednesday or Thursday, then maybe do an encore webinar or send out the replay, kind of a short and sweet type of promotion, which works really, really well. And every once in a while, this is a little bit more rare. Sometimes I've seen people do really, really short webinar promotions that might last just 1 to 3 days. Not 1 day, but 2 to 3 days, let's say. Like, hey, webinar's tomorrow, and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and all that fun stuff. So we have the kind of 3-part video series is one option. Webinars are another option. Another one you can do is having a launch promotion that is just based on email. There's a few different templates for this. They're essentially pretty much the same. There's one of them I got from, heavily inspired by a guy by the name of Daniel Levis. I call it essentially the Daniel Levis launch sequence, which it's a series of emails that might take about it can take 7 to 10 days possibly, or even 7 to 14 days, where essentially it's a story that continues to build on it. And that continues to build and build, and then and there's a few other there's a lot of psychology that goes into it, but that can be a really, really effective thing to do. There's a similar sequence that there's some parallel to a sequence that was popularized by a guy named Travis Sago called a Rainmaker Sequence, and that's similar to like a 7 to 14 day email sequence. The difference between that one and the Levis one is that the Levis one is more serialized, where each of the emails kind of tell this ongoing stories, where the Rainmaker Sequence it's just a little bit different. You can also, for example, speaking of emails, we talked about these. You could even have if you want to be really simple, you could have one email or maybe a couple emails that is all about the opportunity, another email that's showing possibility, another one that's showing certainty, and that could lead to your open cart type promotion. And of course, we have kind of our C launches. I know I'm talking about a lot here, but there's a lot that goes into launches. There are kind of these C promotions, which might just be 3 to 5 days, 4 or 5 days. Those are it's almost like just an open cart sequence where you're not really giving a lot of content. Then, so we have a 3-part video series, webinar launch, email only launches. Then probably my other favorite is a challenge type promotion. Challenge promotions are awesome. And to be honest, I lean towards challenges these days as a really, really good way to do a launch. Especially, they always work, but they work really, really well if you're selling a higher end offer. There's a few reasons for that, but one of the main reasons for that is if you typically you'll utilize a Facebook group inside of your challenge, and Facebook groups are a great way to really engage with your people, where you can really get some accelerated connection that's really going to help you get people to invest in your higher end programs. So challenges are awesome. I actually kind of my preference is a 5-day challenge where you do it Monday through Friday. And then typically you do a big webinar on the following week, typically on the following Tuesday. I've seen people do a 3-day challenge. One of my super clients, Louisa Joe, she does this amazing 10-day challenge that actually leads into a longer open cart period. So that can work out really well. I don't really think you'd want to do more than 10 days, but yes, challenges are awesome. And as you might be able to tell, what I'm doing right now, I'm calling it a workshop, but this actually is a similar what I'm doing right now. I'm doing my own launch right now, where it actually is more of a challenge type structure. So those are the 4 main types of launches you can do. And there's a bonus one. The bonus one, and this is where a lot of the kind of fun stuff goes into it, is that you can actually combine a lot of these things. You can mix and match to come up with your own perfect launch strategy. So for example, you might see in some of these bigger launches, do a 3-part video series that is you do a 3-part video series that leads to a webinar or a series of webinars, for example. Or like I mentioned, a challenge that leads to a webinar or a series of webinar. You can also do a big email only, like more of an email only type promotion that does have a webinar in it, for example. Another thing that I've seen done really well would be to do, you might start with like one core piece of content, like a report, like one really, really good report that is kind of like that has the opportunity, possibility, certainty, and that might lead to a sales video or a webinar, for example. So again, you want to be mixing, you want to be thinking about how you can possibly adapt these different strategies to your specific situation and your specific market. So you might be wondering, how do you know what strategy is the right strategy for you? Well, you're in the right place, because that is my next topic. So here are the main factors you want to look into. There's 4 main factors that will help you uncover what is your optimum launch strategy. Here they are. So first thing you want to look at is you want to look at what kind of launches are your competitors doing? What kind of launches are happening in your marketplace. Excuse me. All right, thank you. Okay, you want to look at what kind of launches are happening in your marketplace. So there's, and you're going to have to think about this for a little bit in the sense that, okay, so if my market, if everybody is doing, let's say a 3-part video series, we'll just keep using that example. If everyone in my market is using a 3-part video series, that can tell you 2 things. On one hand, if everybody's doing that, it's probably a sign that it is working, at least to an extent. As I mentioned, even in the relatively jaded, online marketing space, 3-part video series still do work if they're executed right, and of course, if there's good messaging, et cetera, et cetera. That's one thing. On the other hand, if everyone in your market is doing a 3-part video series, I mean, as you know, as marketers, the main way to stand out as a marketer is to stand out, is to be different. So if everybody's zigging, oftentimes you'll want to zag. So these are really the things that you're going to have to kind of tune into based on a variety of factors. But big picture, before you do your launch, you want to look at what kind of launches are happening in your marketplace. That's the first factor. Second factor is, how does your audience prefer to consume content? So again, it's all about the audience. And so if your audience likes video a lot, then that means that you should probably have more of a video-based launch. Or if they like webinars, for example. So here's an example. Or a couple of examples. So one of my friends, like I believe John Morrow, who you right know, he writes he has a site called Smart Blogger. He serves the blogging community. He's one of the top names in that space. You may have heard of him. Go look up his stuff. He's awesome. And so his people, they're bloggers, so they like to read. They like to read stuff. They're way more into reading stuff than they are watching videos. I would actually be in that category. I'm much more of a writer. As a result of that, I'm also much more of a reader. So when he does his launches, he's very smart, and he does them. Typically, there will be a lot of reports and a lot of PDFs and text-based type of things in his launches. Another example would be, I talked to one of my another former client, a woman by the name of Allie, who some of you know, Allie Shanti, aka Alexis Neely. She has she works with attorneys, and attorneys, they're pretty like online learning and distance learning. That's like a thing for them. So for her, like webinars work really, really well, because that audience, they're used to consuming content via webinars or online trainings and things along those lines. So again, you want to be looking at, how does your audience prefer to consume content when you're mapping out what kind of launch strategy you're going to use. Then the second thing we want to look at is, what are what I call your back of the house superpowers. That means, what are the things that, I've talked about this in other contexts, but just a really quick recap. We have our front of the house superpowers and our back of the house superpowers. Front of the house superpowers, those are the superpowers that you want your audience to see, that you want them to, like the superpowers that the audience sees from their point of view. So for example, in my case, and oftentimes there's overlap between front of the house and back of the house, but in my case, the big front of the house superpower that I like to point at, make people think, which actually is true, is that I'm this marketing genius that can engineer these amazing 6- and 7-figure launch campaigns. That's like my superpowers. People come to me if they want to launch big, if they want to make lots of money in a short amount of time, then I'm their guy. And I want people to know that about me. And that actually is true in the sense that actually is a skill that I have. But my other superpowers, when I say my back of the house superpowers, my things that I'm actually good at, are things like writing and strategy and focus and things like that. And it's not really sexy for me to be like, oh, hey, I'm really great at focusing, give me money. But so, however, those are things that you want to consider, things that you're actually good at. Those are the things that you're going to want to consider when you're doing your launches. So to keep things simple, if you're really good on video, on camera, of course, you're going to want to utilize that in your launches. But if you're not good on camera, then you might not want to use a ton of video, because, video is great, but it's not, it's not always necessary, given a variety of factors. So for example, one of my clients, she is amazing on webinars. She's amazing with PowerPoint presentations, and she smashes it on webinars. However, for whatever reason, she's not, she's good, but she's not like amazing as she's not a top person when it comes to being in front of the camera. She's good, but she's not like, she's not like Marie Forleo, for example. I'm not putting any videos. So for her, she really focuses on doing a lot of webinars in her launches, and she does really, 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 really well for that. So that would be an example of how you want to utilize your powers. So in my case, I do a lot of writing. Writing is by far my best medium versus video or doing webinars. So I actually I like to do more writing when I do launches. And at the same time, I'm not really good at doing a lot of recorded videos, although I am doing one right now. I'm not really good at doing recorded videos, or it's not my jam doing pre-recorded videos, and PowerPoints are not really my jam either. So when I present content, I typically like to do them in this setting where it's just in front of the camera and I'm just giving the information and I'm not stressing out about a bunch of PowerPoints. So that would be an example of me utilizing my back of the house superpowers. And I would say that in my case, one thing that I believe I'm very good at, which I've been told I'm very good at, is I come up with really, really good content. So for me, the idea that I can just go on a video, give really, really good information, and that works for me without a lot of bells and whistles, with a lot of sexy video, which is not exactly in my wheelhouse. Does that make sense? Okay, so the last factor, and so the factors are, what launches are your competitors are doing? How does your audience prefer to consume content? What are your back of the house superpowers? And then the next thing we want to look at is how much lead time do you have? How much runway do you have? I got that term from the great Stu McLaren. So this is what we're talking about here: is how much time do you have between now and when you're going to launch? I mean, that really is kind of the factor, because the honest answer is that obviously the more lead time you have, the more you can create. You have more time to create assets, essentially. And just so you know, if you want, and it's super cool, if you want to do a 3-part video series, like a recorded 3-part video series, like the people who are doing these really big launches with like these highly produced 3-part video series, it works really, really well. And at the same time, it's a lot of work to actually create this, because you have to write the scripts and you have to get them professionally recorded and things like that. It can be a decent sized animal. On the other hand, you can do a 3-part video series without a lot of fancy pre-recorded videos. You could even do it just on just a 3-part video series on Facebook Live, for example. So again, there are different things you can do. And I mean, if you're going to be writing a lot of blog posts or writing a lot of content, writing typically does take a decent amount of time. So you just want to be thinking about these kinds of things. And a little hack here, or a little note I could give you, is typically the kind of I have a bias here. Typically, the launches where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, that have the least amount of lead time, are going to be do a challenge type promotion and or a webinar type promotion. Those are the two that typically doesn't require as many moving parts as some of the other ones. So again, that last factor is how much runway you have. So that is what we got today. I hope this was helpful. Again, we're talking about this is mapping out your launch strategy, your key launch strategy. So just to quickly recap, And then I'll give you our homework assignment for today, and something else super awesome and special. So we talked about the main types of launches that you have at your disposal. We talked about, there's the classic 3-part video series, there's the webinar launch, there's the email only launch, there's a challenge launch. You also have the opportunity to combine these launches into something or combining these different strategies into one that works for you, aka a challenge followed by a webinar or a series webinar, for example. And then to help you figure out what strategy is right for you, we talked about these 4 factors. What kind of launches your competitors are doing? How does your audience prefer to consume content? What are your back of the house superpowers? And how much runway do you have? So our assignment for today is I want you to go through these factors. Okay, so basically your assignment is to answer these 5 questions. So what kind of launches are your competitors doing? How does your audience prefer to consume content? What are your back of the house superpowers? How much runway do you have? Those are the 4 questions. And then based on the above, brainstorm your ideas for the type of launch you would like to have for your next launch. So let me repeat that, and you will have an email that has these in it as well. What kind of launches? Question 1, what kind of launches are your competitors doing? How does your audience prefer to consume content? What are your back of the house superpowers? How much runway do you have? And then based on those, brainstorm your ideas for your next launch that hopefully you already have planned. All right, that's what we got today, but one more exciting thing to let you know about. And that is that, so this is the end of our 3-day workshop. I hope and trust it was very, very valuable to you. However, the hits keep coming. So because I'm in launch mode, I would like to invite you to a special live training event that I am going to be doing this Friday. So 2 days from now, Friday, November 1st, it's going to be at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. The title is Your Heroic Launch Action Plan, how to go from idea to a 6-figure payday in 60 days or less. Your Heroic Launch Action Plan, how to go from idea to 6-figure payday in 60 days or less. And this is going to be really, really good. We're going to take everything that we talked about over the past 3 days and really put it together and give you an action plan for actually making your 6-figure payday happen between now and the end of the year. And as a very, very special incentive for being on this call, I'm going to be doing I'm going to be breaking down my 7-figure open cart sequence for the first time ever live. This is something that has made me and all my clients a lot of money over the years. And it is really, 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 really powerful. Many people have kind of ripped it off, but I'm going to be going over it in detail on this call. You're not going to want to miss this. And yes, I am selling you something. You will have the opportunity to work with me more intimately on your upcoming launch on this call. And really, I have, as you can imagine, I'm going to, on the call itself, I'm going to be giving essentially the mother of all offers, the best offer I can possibly give for working with me personally, which I think is really, really going to blow your mind. So if you have any inkling about possibly working with me and you want to get the best, opportunity to do that possible, you are definitely going to want to be on this webinar. So you'll see more details on how you can sign up for that a little bit later. But for now, let's get to your homework assignment. And if you have any questions, I'll see you in the Facebook group. All right, sounds good. This is Ron Reich. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.